Hi, I'm Radio Nerds. This is Max NG7M, and it's been 8 months since I made a video. This is, hopefully will be not too crazy long, but it's some musings on my RF-KIT RF2K Plus controller upgrade, which is really cool. Reinhardt and team have made a controller upgrade where where you can now use the controller for the RF2K-S amplifier with your RF2K Plus kit, which I've had for several years. So if this may be really boring if you don't have an RF2K Plus, I just thought I'd go over some of the things that I found, give a few more details, took a bunch of pictures as far as the controller upgrade is concerned. So what you have on screen here is the document for doing the controller upgrade. And so Reinhardt put this together. And so there'll be some redundancy here. I mean, he does a good job of going through the upgrade process. You want to read through this once or twice maybe, and then also get familiar with the operating manual and the assembly manual for the RF2K-S, the currently shipping amplifier that you can buy now. So take your time, jump through this. What I'm going to do is I took a bunch of pictures as I disassembled my amplifier and then went through the upgrade process. And then also keep in mind when you look at my amplifier, I've done a lot of custom stuff. I've got a powder coated case, and I've got the the panel on the front that's popular. I can't think of his name all of a sudden. Anyway, if you look through the groups, you'll find that as far as the front of the amplifier is concerned. But digressing a little bit already, the other place you need to go, of course, you need to be a member of the standard RF2K Plus user group, and I'm in the file section here, and that's where you'll find the upgrade manual for the controller. That's what I'm showing you right now. I'm recording it in 4K video, so the text on the screen here will be very small. Just pointing out this is the main group, and then there's a subgroup for the RF2K-S, and then in there you can find the assembly manual, which you'll use for the calibration steps, starting at step 12, if I remember off the top of my head, and then the user manual, which if you want to familiar yourself with the software after you do the upgrade. It's a brand new image. It's similar to the old image, but different developers from what I understand. So those two message groups, obviously, you'll want to look through there, look at the latest stuff. Disregard anything I say as far as being definitive. Look up the latest stuff. So this recording is as of August 15th, 2021. And I started the assembly, I think, Friday night. It's Sunday now. And I actually played around with the amplifier during the WAE contest, sending some QTCs and giving it a good workout, and it's working great. It works just as well as it did before, but now I've got that new controller. So let's see, here's the actual assembly manual that I pointed to. You'll want to get familiar with that. And then the operating manual for the RF2K-S for the software. And this is where the calibration procedures will start on page 5, I think it is, somewhere around there. Let you download the image. Anyway, there's details. Let's get over to the pictures that I took, and I'll just talk through those. But there was the latest software release too, as of today, again, August 15th, that requires a new jumper that I missed, and so I'll point that out. And we'll talk about that as I go through the pictures. So let's just jump right over to the pictures that I took, and I'll put a link in the description of the video, and you can find my typical photo album link, and you'll be able to see all the pictures that we're looking at here. So we're going to pull this up. This is where there's a little bit of redundancy. This is the hardware that comes with the kit. You've got these standoffs. 3 of them are female on both ends, and one is a male to female. And then you've got some lock screws and, the typical stuff. The USB cables and HDMI cables, this USB cable right here is to power the new Raspberry Pi 4, which you'll have to buy on your own. And you only need the 2 GB version. I was shocked to see how the price has gone up over the last 6 months or year, whatever. Man, they're $60 or something now. So you'll have to pick that up, and you have to get an SD card too, high capacity, HD SD card. You don't need a lot of memory, 16 gigs or whatever is probably fine. I think Reinhardt mentions that. And then this next USB cable is what goes from the Raspberry Pi into the new controller, I believe. And then the HDMI cable, which is the micro HDMI to standard HDMI, which you take the output of the Raspberry Pi 4 here and put it into the display, the touchscreen display. And then you'll reuse your USB A to micro USB for the touchscreen capabilities of the display. And then you've got these 3 ribbon cables, and they actually are part of the adapter. There's an adapter PCB daughter card, if you want to call it that, that goes to the RF2K-S controller upgrade. So there you go. That's that. This is my amplifier. I've done a lot of modifications. You can see my videos on that. And one modification I did, wow, it's been well over a year ago, maybe going on 2 years, was to punch a couple holes in the side to get more airflow through the amplifier rather than just coming through the front here. And I've done some modifications you'll see next. A little bit of a digression, but they've been well worth it. The amplifier runs really cool. In fact, during the WAE contest when I was sending QTCs, I never saw the amplifier go above 47C on 20 meters, and I was running full tilt, 1500 watts out. There's the other side, powder coated case, the front panel I mentioned earlier. Okay, so here we've got, I can probably rotate that. Let's see, there we go. Just looking at the current RF2K Plus controller, which has an Arduino on it. This PCB will be removed. The Arduino will be gone. And, you know, this HDMI cable will be replaced. Anyway, my amplifier, just for reference. Oh, one thing to keep in mind, we talk about the fan plugs, and Reinhardt makes a point of that to make sure they actually reverse. And so I have to make sure you get the polarity right on those fans, because if you get it wrong, you're going to pop or blow a surface-mounted transistor, I suspect, because of the polarity reverse. So be careful on that. This is my amplifier. I've had this in operation for a long time. I actually have the clamps on my LD-MOS devices, and I rigged up and split one of the fan headers coming off the controller to control the front fan and this fan that blows across the top of the clamps, which I have some heat sinks on. So just a custom NGM modification there. So your amplifier's not going to have that. I am using the 13 dB pad, which I'm happy with. I think most of the operators out there are probably using the 13 dB pad or maybe the 16 dB pad in the US anyway. I'm happy with the 13 dB pad, and that'll come into play a little bit later too, based upon there's a high-low jumper on the new controller for the overdrive sense. I think you have to pay attention to that. All right, here's another shot of the clamps that I have on my LD-MOS devices. Don't worry about it if you don't have these. I have them, so I just thought I'd show them there. And they're torqued down properly, and I put some, glued some little heat sinks on the top in there to maybe draw off a little more of the heat there. It runs great. Okay, one thing to keep in mind, this is the existing controller. Pay close attention to this connector here, because all these wires in this particular connector will be translate over to the new controller directly, except for this cable right here, and you'll see it a little bit later. This will get removed. This is the cable where it's taking 5 volts from the low power supply in the amplifier that is powering the Raspberry Pi 3 in the current version. So this will be removed because the power now comes from the new controller, which gets the power from this plug here, and then you have that nice USB to USB-C to plug into your Raspberry Pi 4. All right, just another view of the Raspberry Pi 3. A little tidy here. You can see the splitter I used for that fan on top of the RF deck PCB there, up there. Yeah, okay. Another shot across the top of the RF deck. Here is the touchscreen removed, the standard HDMI controller, and this is the touchscreen micro USB that will plug into the new Raspberry Pi 4. So nothing changes here. Just pull the cover off, or pull the front panel off. Life will be a lot easier. And this is the Raspberry Pi 3. You can see how I have things tidied up. I did a lot of work early on. I have lots of ferrites on all the control cables going back to the power supplies. You can see a little bit of the RF cable that you'll be desoldering from the old controller. This is the RF sampler, which is really nice if you want to sample RF even at up to 2K, I guess. If you want to look at your CW keying envelope or your sideband waveform, whatever. So still looking at the old stuff. This will be removed off of the old controller board. You'll notice here, this is the fan that goes to the power supply over here on the left side, looking from the front. This will be reversed on the new controller. You have the ground on the right, and the 12 volts will be on the center pin still. So this will be flopped over. All right, I think we're getting to where we're going to start taking stuff apart here. Another shot of this. always good to have that camera with lots of pictures, so in case you got mixed up, you'd be able to you know, get all these colors right. So you'll translate this over. These two right here will be removed. And the fans on the right side of the controller, again, these are going to be flopped over reversed. The ground is going to be over here on the right side. Here is the daughter card or the adapter board, which will go in first. And I screwed up here on the standoffs. You'll put this 3 female-female standoffs here, here. Make sure you put it here, not here, down here. And over here, this one needed to be moved down here. You'll see that later. And another good close-up of the connectors there. These 4 ribbon cables will translate over directly. Reinhardt suggests labeling these 1, 2, 3, and 4 from the top down. I had them taped up nicely, so that was very easy to do. And there's a little bit of a gotcha on these 2 connectors, which you'll see later. They're 10-pin connectors, and the ribbon cable connectors that I have on these 2 connectors only have 9 pins. The 10th one is plugged up. And that's actually referenced in the forum too. You'll find some posts about the need to remove a couple of those pins, which we will see later. Okay, so now I have the RF sampling coax. I've reworked that to remove the solder off the old controller here. So, you know, be careful, take that off. And another shot of the new controller. You can see I've moved the standoff here down to the right location. And now you've got the front of the amplifier at the front removed, and I've removed the Raspberry Pi 3, and I'll start removing these cables. This blue cable you see here going from the Arduino into the Raspberry Pi 3, that will be left over. You won't need that anymore. There'll be 1 USB slot open on the new Raspberry Pi 4. So we will move on from here. You can see I've got the headers removed for the fans, the one on the power supply over here, and then the 2 for the front and rear, and in my case, the one on the top of the, you know, up there on the LD-MOS devices. And, okay, I mentioned this earlier, so you can see right here, this is, have I put the new controller in? Wow. I don't think so. I just removed the pins. But you're going to see right here on these 2 connectors, this is plugged up. These 2 pins are plugged up right there. And here you've got the old controller. I've removed it. I laid it down. Reinhardt shows a picture of this, and then he's one by one he moves over the wires. I had my picture, so I removed everything because I ended up removing this wire right here, which was powering the Raspberry Pi 3. So these two wires will be removed, and this cable will be left over. You won't need that anymore. So it cleans that up a little bit. And another good shot there that I was referring to in case I, you know, mess something up. All right, now there is the old controller. It's lonely now. It's no longer used. And so you can see on the old controller, this pin right here and this pin right here had already been removed. They are not removed on the new controller. So now here we've got the daughter card, the adapter board that I've mounted in now. So I've got it screwed in with the hardware in place, ready to accept everything. And I've actually got the wires already translated over. I guess I didn't take a picture until I'd already moved these wires over. So all the wires are in here right now, and I wasn't quite sure if I needed that the power going to the USB micro. So I removed this later, but it's in right now. It just never got used. And one thing to you want to make sure of, if you're using the 13 dB pad on the RF deck, this will need to be on the high position, which I've moved it over. It is not moved over in this position. So I just had to look over at my amplifier there. So this jumper right here will be moved to the high position. That's very important, and it's very clear in the latest document, okay? So make sure you pay attention to the low and high here, and if you have the 13 dB pad, you'll want this on the high. If you have the 3 dB pad, you'll want it on the low side. So this was moved over to the high side on my amplifier before I started operating. All right, now we're looking closer at the daughter card. You can see how I've got the wires over there nice and tidy. This cable will be removed. And you can still see right here on these 2 connectors, I still have this pin right here is still in there, so I won't be able to plug those ribbon cable connectors in the 10-pin connectors. And just another shot from that angle. I've got the Ethernet connector, or the controller. This gets all the data from the the antenna tuner and everything else coming off the back of the amplifier. That's plugged in, keep things nice and tidy. And here you can see I could not plug these in. So I went to plug these in, I was like, uh-oh. So I got on the group, I poked around, just looked, and lo and behold, there were some messages that one from Reinhardt that just said, you know, desolder this pin, which I did. So I took the board off, then I just took a soldering iron, pair of pliers on the front, heated it up, and just pulled this pin out on these two middle connectors. Right here, these two actually are the middle ones right here, X13 and X14, whatever it is. Anyway, you may not have that with your plugs. I'm not sure. I did. I had to pull these two pins out. And you can see that right here. Here are the two connectors. These two are plugged up, so I had to pull those pins out. And now the pins have been removed. You can see right here and here. And I don't know why I took another shot here, but I did. Anyway, so here's the new adapter board. And now I've got the 4 ribbon cables all plugged in nice, ready to go. Oh, and so here I kind of jumped ahead here, but here's a shot of moving that jumper to the high side from the low side of the high side, because I'm using the 13 dB pad. That's for the high input detection. And okay, let's talk about this one right here. This is another important one too. This is JP1 that's on the actual controller. And you will, for the RF2K Plus, you want to make sure that this jumper is removed. And on the latest software, remove this jumper and put it on position C, because that will then tell the new software image that you're running an RF2K Plus amplifier. So apparently in the software there's some timings, or I don't know what's going on there. But you'll see I have some screenshots of the original before I put the jumper on position C with the latest image, and it actually is showing the amplifier as an RF2K-S. So I didn't research all the details. I don't think there's a lot of details out there, but make sure it's very important. If you're using the 13 dB pad, right, you're going to remove this, put this jumper over on C. I don't show it here, but that is now on C. Otherwise, when you boot up with that latest image, you're going to see RF2K-S on screen, and you'll see that in some pictures later on. So hopefully I didn't confuse you there. I didn't see reference to jumper C until I paid attention. Let me go here. The release notes for the latest image talk about that. So this is from Reinhardt. So he talks about, right, to identify the version of your amp, we introduce jumper C on the controller. During boot up, the software knows that it's dealing with the RF2K Plus when that jumper C is in there. So there's some timing issues related to that. I'll be honest, I operated my amplifier quite a bit without that jumper C in there. I didn't have any issues. And I did all the calibration, didn't have any issues. I put the jumper C in, and now the software is showing RF2K Plus, and I feel better. I missed that. So don't miss that. Don't be me. All right, moving on the pictures. The next one, I'm getting ready to solder the RF sampling coax. Right, it goes to the back of the amplifier where that SMA connector is, that SMA female connector is. And I actually put the amplifier up on the back side. It made it easier for me to desolder and solder this back in. And so now you can see that I soldered it back in. Do a nice job, clean up your flux, whatever. I don't like sloppy soldering. So that's connected back now. And now you can see that I've got the, this is the new controller mounted now. You can see the fan connectors now are reversed. Pay close attention here. 12 volts is on the center pin. The ground is on the pin on the right, looking from the front of the amplifier. And that's on both plugs. And I think I've got some other pictures later on. The other thing on the new controller, I don't think I used, I'm jumping around a little bit here. I don't think I used the lock washers on one of the screws because it was so close to some of the components. And I don't know if I have a shot of that. So I just felt better on one of the screws. I think I put it on the lock washer on 3 of the screws, but not on 1. It's not a big deal. So let's jump ahead. Here's the other fan connector, right? It's reversed. 12 volts in the center, ground on the right. Very important. You don't want to make that mistake and have an issue. And so now you can see the full new controller is installed. Just be careful when you put the adapter cables in. I routed them, folded them as best I could. And you can see it's looking pretty tidy so far. I haven't put the Raspberry Pi 4 in yet. This is all for future stuff. I understand the battery you won't be using. And you can see over here, this is that jumper 1 that I was talking about. You're gonna, if you have the 13 dB pad, you've got the jumper on the adapter board up here, back here, that needs to be on high if you're using the 13 dB pad. And then for the RF2K Plus, this controller, JP1, needs to be off, and you need to move the jumper or get another jumper out of your junk box or whatever and put it on position C. And I do not have, I'm not showing that right here. Just repeating myself several times. The fans are plugged in here. I'm a ferrite nut, so I've got some ferrites on those. I think I ended up maybe changing some of these ferrites later on. Anyway, so now we're getting ready to put the Raspberry Pi 4 in. And now the Raspberry Pi 4 is in. I've done a nice job with all the tidiness of the cables. And Reinhardt in the controller upgrade document is very explicit about where to plug in these USB cables. I don't know that that matters, but you will be using 3 of the USB-A connectors here, and the front lower one is not used. So you got 2 in the back, and then you also have, here's the power going to the Raspberry Pi 4. This is a USB-C over here, so you can see that cable coming up to here. You put it in the middle USB connector on the controller, and the power is coming through the ribbon cables, I'm assuming, to the controller up here. And there's also a USB to a USB micro that plugs into the Raspberry Pi 4, and then the third one is the one going to the touch screen, right? The serial touch screen. And then you have the HDMI, micro HDMI to HDMI that right here. I plugged it in port 0, probably doesn't matter, but I plugged it on the right side over here. So, you know, do a nice tidy job there. Make sure none of your wires on the fans touch the fan on the front, you know, in front of the heatsink fan section back there. Close up there of the power, USB-C. And, okay, a little bit of a disclaimer here. The adapter cable for the micro HDMI that was shipped with the kit is bigger. I actually had one that's a little longer that met my needs, and it made it easier. I didn't have to fold it over, because Reinhardt, he shows that this folded over with a zip tie because the cable's fatter on the one he ships with the kit. So I had a different one that I used, so I did not use the one that came with the kit. It's a little longer. It just makes it a little easier to work if I remove the front panel. So a little bit of a modification. Your cable will not look like this. And I didn't have to fold mine over. So you can see here is the micro HDMI cable that comes around here and then goes up here to you'll plug into the front panel. You'll see that later. Oh, here it is, a better picture. So this is not the cable that came with the kit. It's one I had. It's a little longer. The cable's a little more flexible. It worked just fine. And here is the touchscreen micro USB connection that you've always had. And here's the left side of the Raspberry Pi 4. I had still not removed this cable right here, which is no longer needed. It's gone now. And I think we're about done here. Just some more pictures. Here's the front panel on. Everything's tidied up. Just double checking to make sure none of my cables got in the way of the front fan of the heatsink back there, or in the front, you know, looking from the front. Here's the back of the controller right here, and then the adapter is, you know, on this side. Let's see. Here's the controller, there's the adapter. Everything's looking good. I ended up putting some heat sinks on these chips, these Raspberry Pi 4s, because I had them and I had the glue. They notoriously run pretty hot. I had them, and you'll see those later. And just another shot looking down after the front panel's been put on. And here's the first boot up. And it booted right up. I didn't have any issues. Dropped right in the software. I think the boot up time is faster with the Raspberry Pi 4. I am using a V30 HD SD card. Might be a little bit faster. Your mileage may vary there. Boot up time is faster than the old Raspberry Pi 3. I don't know if that's the Raspberry Pi 4 or if it's the faster HD SD card that I'm using. You can see right here that I did not have jumper C in, and I don't know at this point if I had upgraded the image. I don't think I had. It was 109, if you can see that. The latest image is 112 as the time I made this video. And once I put the jumper on C in the latest image, you're going to start to see B26 RF2K Plus, which makes more sense, right? Because I have a 2K Plus. So, I mean, that's it, you guys. Here's a little closer shot of the screen. There you can see it's, I hadn't upgraded at this point, 109. And another shot, there's lots of bright green LEDs here. There's a red LED that comes on if you're in operate mode. You'll see over here one of these other LEDs will be red when you are in operate. I'm just making this up as I go. Oh, there it is. So I have it in, it's not in standby anymore, it's in operate. That's the LED that will light up once you're in operate. And this is really bright. You'll see it through the front of the amplifier, right? Did I show it? Yeah, you can see the green there from the front of the amplifier. So looking pretty good. Another shot from the other side, looking down in there at the Raspberry Pi 4. Oh, you can see the heat sinks. I have them on there now. This must be a, from here, they're not on. The heat sinks are not on here. Now they are. Glued them on. You know, if there's airflow on, it's going to run a little cooler. Actually, quite a bit cooler, believe it or not. These things run hot. Just some good reference images there. There's the other side. And I think this brings us to a close. Well, I'll quickly reference the calibration section and just read carefully. So you can see I taped a, you know, I now have an RF2K plus S, I guess, without the pin diode switching. So, and that is the end of the pictures there. So let's go back to the calibration. So this is the latest software release document I showed you. And here we are in the, I think that's the, you want to go to the assembly and adjustment instructions to find the calibration. And if you look in the controller upgrade, right, it'll reference the calibration at the end. You know, it goes through all the, just read through this carefully. Right, there's a little bit of a, you know, English is not Reinhardt's first language. He does a great job. Just be careful as you read through this. Read it a couple times. It'll be well worth your time. The jumper, obviously I didn't talk about that, but the RF jumper for the sampling, right? Let's see here. Fans. There's that HDMI cable, the one that comes with it. He shows you putting a zip tie on it. I didn't have to use that. It gets into the, you'll need to refer on the alignment and the adjustments for the SWR bridge. I have the jumpers in on my SWR bridge, and so I use these two pots for the forward adjustment and reverse adjustment, and then the pins forward and reflected here. I put my multimeter on here to test for the voltages there. So I've got the jumpers in, so you don't mess with these pots. These two pots will not be used. These pots here are used. And right now it's pretty decent across the bands. I mean, you can spend hours and hours and hours trying to get everything tweaked just perfect on the meter on the front of the amplifier. I didn't get crazy and it's looking pretty good. What's really cool on the new software is you can go in on every band and you can adjust the meters so they look proper across the bands, because there's just variations, right? There's just so many factors with the different impedances in your antenna system and everything else. You know, don't get too crazy worrying about the, you know, if the adjustment's off by 50 watts or something. Get on the air and operate. That's what I'd do. And I think he then tells you to go to page 5 in the assembly manual. And for, well, page 5 shows you how to get the image, right? This is where yeah, this will take a while to download. It's a big image. It's like 15 gig download or 5 gig and then 15 gigs uncompressed. Oh, make sure and use the international version. I think there was a post about that. Reinhardt is saying make sure you use the international version of the image, which I did. And then it gets into the, I think it's step 22 where you start to do the alignment off the top of my head. Let's just jump down there. Well, I must have passed it already. Or step 12, I can't remember. Anyway, follow the instructions. Yeah, you start right here. The voltage display. You know, and they have to refer back to the other document with the SWR bridge. And you'll, yeah, step 12 here, I believe is what you start with. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, blah, blah, blah. The bias adjustment, I'm glad I looked at this. I run with a higher bias on my devices. And so I have about 2.7 amps per device. And so I went through the work and actually put an amp meter in through the high power the high voltage section. I didn't have to change my my bias at all, but I just wanted to get the display on the amp meter on the controller correct, which I did. And one tricky thing there is you have to get a little RF into the amplifier. You're not going to see a reading on the amp meter on the front of the display, so you can adjust it. So I had to adjust it to the bias. When I have the bias, no RF going to the deck, right? You remove a cable, right? You remove this cable, but you still need, you can't just key the amplifier. You have to have some RF into the amplifier, even though it's not going to the RF deck, for the controller to sense some input RF, and then it'll actually show you the amps that are being drawn once it's being keyed. I probably wasn't very clear on that, but I didn't follow the instructions like this. I actually put an amp meter in line on the high power side because my bias is more than 3.6 amps total. It's more like 5.8 amps, which is fine. Just stick with the instructions. You get a little better IMD from what I understand if you have your bias a little higher, so mine's a little higher. I've rambled on long enough. Don't take anything I say as the source of truth by any means. Go to the forums, read up on the latest information, etc., etc. And I hope you found this helpful, everyone. And it's really cool, right? We've got this amplifier that is still relevant today. We can get new updates and everything as far as that goes. Have fun with the amplifier, and most of all, get on the air and operate. It's working great for me. I'm really happy with the upgrade so far. There's a little bit of, I use CAT control, and it seems like I'm losing, or it takes a little longer to connect on the CAT, but I'll play around with that a little bit more. And I mentioned that to Reinhardt, but other than that, everything's working as expected. Oh, if you want to see the software on screen, let me just show you that real quick. Let's see. So as I've been talking, the amplifier's gone to sleep. I'm in CAT mode, and you're going to see the voltage now come up here to 53.5 volts right here. And I got my picture mood right there. And I'm on 20 meters, right? If I change my amplifier, CAT, you're going to see the band change to 17 meters, back to 20 meters. And you can change to the needle display by just clicking here. I'm using VNC here. There's instructions how to get VNC set up. So you can flip between those, as far as that goes. Go into the menus, check some stuff out. The calibration menu here, that's what I was rambling on about. When it's drawing amperage, you won't see a reading here unless you put a little bit of power to the input. I mentioned that earlier. Network settings, for Wi-Fi, interface. Everything's cleaned up here. You can set the default for your interface. I'm using CAT. But it's nice. It's cleaned up. I do not use the antenna tuner. I never have. All my antennas are resonant, or I use an external tuner on the low bands. So, quick and dirty tour there, everybody. And 73 for now, and I hope you found this video interesting, and hope to hear you on the air. 73, NG7M.